Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Top 10 Hidden Harmony Productivity Features. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. You're welcome to submit questions at any time using the chat window on your screen. We'll address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. If we don't manage to answer all of your questions, someone will follow up with you shortly via email. If you're interested in trying out the enterprise version of Harmony, please send us a request in the chat window and someone will contact you after the webinar to get you started. We'll also make a recording of the webcast available to you within a couple of days. It's my pleasure to introduce you to today's speaker, Richard Poole, Chief Technology Officer of EMEA at Harmony. Richard heads up the pre-sales team for Harmony across the EMEA and Asia Pacific regions, working both directly with key accounts as well as Harmony's partner channel. Bringing with him almost 20 years of experience in data management systems, Richard has helped many companies to realize the significant benefits in productivity that collaborative platforms enable. Before joining Harmony in 2011, Richard worked for Dassault Systems PLM for over 10 years. Richard also has a Bachelor of Engineering degree in Automotive Engineering from Loughborough University. Richard, please get us started.
Thank you, Susan, and welcome everyone. So today's session is really to illustrate how much more Harmony is than just giving you the ability to drag and drop emails and attachments from Outlook into SharePoint, which obviously some people in the audience might be customers, some of you may be using the free version of Harmony, or some of you may be obviously looking at Harmony to roll out your organization. And it may be that you've kind of come to Harmony from, you've got a requirement to capture emails or capture attachments into SharePoint. But yeah, I think there's a lot more that Harmony can offer. And there's also multiple kind of flavors of the Harmony solution as well. So kind of like our bread and butter version is the Outlook integration on the desktop, which many of you may already know to some degree. But we also have solutions for mobile devices. So we have a standalone mobile app that gives you rich access to SharePoint content and allows you to capture it and things. But also we have a number of apps for Outlook in a browser and also the other Office applications like Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. So we'll touch on various parts of each of these through the course of today's session. And really go beyond, as I say, the kind of drag and drop basic functionality that we have in the core product. So we're going to go through some other ways to capture content, not just using drag and drop. Also being kind of notified when new activity is occurring, actually sharing content and capturing new content that may have been updated externally. How to organize, or different ways to organize your content in SharePoint and how Harmony can facilitate that. Accessing content from other Office applications, working with lists, and also some introduction to some cool new features that we're going to be releasing shortly that integrates more deeply into Teams in Office 365 and also the Compliance Center retention labels as well. So I'll be demonstrating a few pieces of functionality that support those as a bit of a sneak peek of what's coming in the next version of Harmony. So first off, if we take a look at kind of other ways beyond kind of like the drag and drop of emails and attachments, which many of you may, as I say, be familiar with. You can also save attachments or save emails by right-clicking on them in Outlook and using the contextual menus. So, right-click on an attachment, and I can say to save those attachments to SharePoint and then get taken through the process of doing that. Likewise, I can do that on emails as well. We've also got a number of ribbon controls that are installed as part of the Outlook sidebar to allow you to save attachments, save messages nice and easily in that way as well. So another way of capturing content is actually documentation that you may have on a file share or on your local machine, and being able to get those from Windows Explorer into the sidebar is really, really powerful. So if we take a look at each of those just briefly in a live environment, as we said before, like if I go to, let's say, one of my favorite locations that I'm using for the purposes of today's webinar, I can easily choose to right-click on an email and say to save that message to SharePoint, and then it will ask me where I want to actually save that. Or if I've got attachments, I can right-click on those and say save to SharePoint as well in the same way. So if there's multiple attachments there, you'll be able to choose which ones you want to put into SharePoint. And you've also got some options there to actually replace the attachments in the email with links to the documents in SharePoint. As I say, likewise, if I just take a look at one of my emails here, you'll see that I've got ribbon controls there to say whether I want to save the attachment. So exactly the same as I had on the right mouse button clicks there, but also I can choose to save the email message, and I've got some shortcuts there to recent locations that I've been working in too. So nice and easily be able to select the location without necessarily having to navigate to it first. So it's just an alternative way of actually getting the content into SharePoint. So as I mentioned, we've also got the ability to take content from a file share. So if I've got some documentation that I can get to from Windows Explorer, even multiple items, I can drag and drop those into the sidebar, and I can apply metadata and things, and we'll take a look at that a little bit later on as well in a bit more detail. So I can choose the content type, fill in the metadata, and capture the content nice and easily. So it's not just drag and drop from Outlook, there's also drag and drop from Windows Explorer as well in a similar manner. So another important thing when you're working in a collaborative environment and using SharePoint to support that is being notified when there's new activity, when there's new updates or new content that you may be interested in. So Harmony has a favorites mechanism, which we can use for a number of different things. But firstly, just adding some location as a favorite means I can easily get to it from a drop-down menu, also like a start view that we can set as the kind of initial view when you start up Harmony. And so that you can add anything that you navigate to as a favorite. You can name it whatever you like, so it's personal to you. And it could be filtered views, it could be folders, it could be document sets, or an entire library, for example, or a site. And when I add something as a favorite, I also have a number of different options there. So the one that we'll be focusing on just here is actually being able to follow that location for activity. What that means is that when there's new updates in one of those locations, so for example here I'm following a favorite that I've called accounts, so our accounts library, and I can see that some of my colleagues have been capturing some content, maybe has updated some existing documents, have been working on them. So everything is fully security trimmed there. I'll only be able to see the updates that I've got permission to see, and the documents that I've got permission to access. And it's all contextual, so I can easily actually take a look at the changes of any of those items just by opening up the sidebar. So again, just taking a look at an example of that. If we go to, let's say, this library here, or actually let's just navigate to a different one for a second. So if I go to maybe this legal docs library, where I've got a number of documents and a number of document sets, for example, in this particular instance. So if I drill down into one of those sets, in this case, there's no content there yet, but maybe I want to be notified when documentation gets added to that. So I can easily do that just by adding that as a favorite. As I say, it takes the name of the library, the view, and the document set in this case. So maybe I just want to rename that just to say, okay, these relate, all these, the favorite relates to a particular matter. And I want to follow it for activity. I can also choose to follow any subfolders in that location as well. And what will happen now is that whenever there's anything new that gets added or edited in this particular location, I'll get a red dot on what we call the People tab or the Update tab. So if I click on that, it will take me directly to a contextual activity stream of the locations that I'm following, and I can choose from the drop down here which locations I actually want to see activity from at the moment. So, for example, if I untick the accounts library there, you'll see that I get a different set of updates. And I can filter that down. So maybe I'm just interested in maybe our something to do with Teams or something. So as I type ahead there, you'll see that it will actually filter that down to only show updates that meet the criteria I'm actually typing. So nice and easy, everything's contextual here. So if I click on the document, it's going to navigate to that document or the location, for example. So if I just click on that, it'll actually take me directly to where that update was coming from. And that's really powerful when you're working in lots of different areas in your SharePoint environment, so that you're not having to go and actively look for updates, and you're not having to receive lots of email notifications to say that something's been updated. You can see all in one place a kind of unified activity stream. So let's just go back to where we were working before, and we'll carry on with the rest of the session. So sending documents is something that Harmony does very, very well, and it gives you a number of different options. So for example, when I drag and drop a document into an email, by default, it creates a link to that document. If I do need to send it as an attachment, I can do that as well, just by holding down the Alt key while I drag and drop the document into the email, and it will send it as an attachment instead. But also, when I'm sending a link, for example, and then I hit send, Harmony is able to actually process those links that I'm sending. Only does that on SharePoint links and OneDrive, for example. So it will ignore any other kind of links to websites and things. But it will check whether the recipients that you're sending that email to have access to the links that you're sending them. And if they don't have access and you have the mechanism enabled in your SharePoint library, you can even grant them view or edit capabilities so that they can access the documents that you're sending them a link to. So again, let's take a look at that in our environment here. So for example, if I now want to compose a new email and send, for example, this document here to my colleague Susan, then you'll see obviously by default, as I say, it creates a link to that document. If I need to send it as an attachment, I can just hold down the Alt key while I drag and drop. Then the document will actually get downloaded and attached to the email. But in this case, I don't want to do that. So I want to send it as a link, but I don't necessarily know if Susan has access to this particular document. So when I hit send, Harmony is able to check whether Susan has access and grant her view or edit capabilities. It will actually tell me who doesn't have access as well, because it might be that I'm sending it to a list of different people, and some people have access and some people don't. So there's a number of different ways to do that. And then when I hit, obviously, as I say, when I hit send, it's going to grant Susan the access that I choose. But in that scenario as well, if I do need to send a document as an attachment to somebody external, for example, it's very common that you're going to receive that back as another attachment, and 9 times out of 10, the attachment will have a different file name. So Harmony has the ability to actually drag and drop the new updated document that you have received by email onto the document in SharePoint and add it as a new version. And I think that's really powerful when you're collaborating with external parties. So it's something that I do like to show to people, because I think from a, as I say, from a collaboration point of view, even if people are working outside of your SharePoint environment, you can still track the changes that they've made and maintain the version history in SharePoint. So for example, here we sent that that contract out, and now I've received it back with a different file name because the client has made some changes to it. So if I were to just capture that into SharePoint as is, it would be considered a completely new document, but I actually want to add it as a new version of this contract that we've got in our SharePoint library. So if I just drag and drop that into the sidebar on the document that I want to add as a new version and wait for a few seconds, you'll see that I have the option to add it as a new version. And what that does is it's actually doing a number of steps in one drag and drop process. So it's renaming the attachment that I've received back to the original file name. It's checking out the document from SharePoint, and it's giving me the option to, in this case, update any of the metadata. So maybe I want to say that this is now in process and we're discussing it. And I can update, as I say, any of the other editable properties there as well. So if I hit save, it's going to check that document in for me, and it even gives me an option to add a comment. So I could say that this has been edited by client. And now that document is checked in and made available to other people. Again, if we go back to the kind of like the previous function that I showed of, following for updates, if somebody else is following this particular location, they'd be notified that I've added a new version of that document. And if they go to the version history, for example, they'll see that there's a new version and which version was edited by the client, and can open up specific versions from here as well. So I can choose which version I want to open, and again, if you've got permission to do so, you can manage the versions from there. So really nice and easy to work both internally and externally with your clients and colleagues in a consistent manner. So SharePoint is obviously a platform for lots of different things. The main kind of scenario that we look at is kind of document management and email management on SharePoint. But there's still many different ways that you can organize content in SharePoint libraries. So Harmony supports all the different ways that you can organize your content in SharePoint, and that could be using folders if you need to, or using document sets as we saw in a previous scenario, but also the use of views in SharePoint. So for example, here, I can display the same content in different ways by choosing different views that are configured in the library. I can also filter those views down to actually give me a focused view of the content I'm interested in. So using tags and terms with the taxonomy service, you can type in what you want to kind of filter by. So that's one way to filter, and we can see here it's actually filtering by a managed metadata field with the term alpha. But also I can filter by any of the columns that I'm displaying as well. So I can right click on, for example, who modified the content, or when it was modified, or any of the columns that are being displayed. And you can filter on multiple columns as well. It's nice and easy to actually stay focused on the important information, and then you can add those as favorites, you can follow them, all those kind of things, and you can even, like it shows here, save a modified view or a filtered view as a private view for yourself in SharePoint directly from the Harmony interface. And lastly, on this section, it's very handy to be able to apply metadata to multiple items in one hit. So it could be when you're actually capturing the content. So I think, like we briefly saw earlier, if I drag onto that alpha tag there, or term, then it gives me the option to actually apply that metadata when I'm saving it, so the user doesn't have to enter that themselves. But also, if I select multiple items and edit the properties on them, I can edit them en masse. But also, if I'm capturing multiple items at the same time, I can apply common metadata to all of the items that I'm selecting. So just to illustrate each of those in our environment here. So this library, we can see that we've got a default view which is being grouped by the project name in this case, but also I've got other views available to me. So it might be I want to display just a flat list of all the content in this library, or I want to show just the content organized by another piece of metadata, in this case the kind of region, which might be a lookup property, or I actually want to have a view that is filtered and grouped to start with. So in this case, it's only showing the emails in this library, because the view in SharePoint is filtering on the content type, and it's also displaying specific email view columns in the view, and it's also being grouped by the project name as well. So it's a really nice combination of presenting the data in many different ways. So if we look at kind of filtering that information as well, and again, it could be filtering the view that I've selected. So in this case, just the emails being grouped by the project name. But now I'm just interested in the alpha project. So without having to type and, without having to kind of click on anything and drop down and select and things, I can actually just start typing what I want to filter that by, and that we use any of the taxonomy type properties in that library. So if you don't have any taxonomy properties in the library, that button will be grayed out. So some people might ask, why is that button grayed out? It's because you don't have any tags or terms available there. So the other way to filter information, and again we can combine these as well, is to actually right click on the column name. So for example, I'm just interested in emails that relate to the alpha project that were received from, let's say, James and Angela. So now I've got a very, very concise filtered view of information there. And like I say, that can be then added either as a personal view in SharePoint. So I can add that from here and say, okay, these are alpha project emails. And that's available not only in my Harmony interface, but also in the SharePoint interface in a browser as well, because it is actually a SharePoint private view. But also I can choose to add that as a favorite and follow it like we saw before. So we talked about kind of like capturing content and applying metadata automatically. So for example, here, if I've got an email that I received and I want to capture that, I can actually drag that on top of the grouped property in this case and assign it with that alpha value. So really nice and easy to fill in metadata. Obviously, if you've got everything configured correctly for email management and stuff in the library as well, it will pull across the header information from those emails, and I can save that automatically as well. But likewise, it might be that actually I want to update some of the properties on each of these items. So maybe I want to reclassify these because actually they don't relate to this alpha project in this case, but relate to a different project instead. So let's change that to delta. So I can update the metadata on multiple items. Because that view was being grouped by that information, we'll see that actually comes through. And if we just go to our kind of default view there, we'll see those have actually now been kind of reallocated to the Delta project in this case. So obviously we've been focusing entirely on the Outlook integration so far, but Outlook isn't the only application that people use day in, day out. There's obviously Word, Excel, and PowerPoint that are very popular applications, and there's a number of different ways that Harmony can facilitate working with SharePoint from those applications as well. So the first one requires no additional install at all. When you install the Outlook integration of Harmony, it actually adds the favorites that you've added in the Outlook integration into the standard open and save as dialogues in Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. So it means that when you browse for maybe to open a document, you can expand the Harmony favorites section here, and it will be all the locations that you've added as favorites in the Outlook sidebar. The other alternative is to actually use the Office apps that we have available, which are available for Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, both on the desktop and in Office Online in a browser as well. So basically that gives you some extra ribbon controls to open content from SharePoint or save content to SharePoint directly from the UI here, and select the location. It could be a team that you're working in, or your OneDrive or SharePoint site, and then browse to the necessary library, capture the metadata and check the document in, all within one single interface. So again, just a brief look at both of those. So if we actually go to Word here, you'll see first off, if I go to the kind of file menu, so if I click on open and open up the browse icon here, obviously I can browse to my recent locations and things as well, but you'll see that there's a new entry here for Microsoft Word, and under there is my Harmony favorites. So these are links to my SharePoint libraries that I've been working in. So it might be like a document set for a matter. It might be like those alpha documents that we saw before. So if I just actually click on, I'm logged in as a different user here, so let me just cancel that. So like the presentation or the documents that we were working on for this webinar today. So if I just go into there, then I'll see the content within that particular library. Obviously, in this instance, it's just showing me the Word documents in that library, but it's then working with the kind of built-in SharePoint connectivity to those locations. As I said, the other alternative is to use the ribbon controls here to actually save content to and from SharePoint. So if I click the save to SharePoint icon, the app will load up in Word in this case. I've got shortcuts to my recent locations, my SharePoint sites that I've connected to, and I can manage those from here as well to say, what do I actually want to see in the interface there? And select a location. So for example, if I put this in this document library here that I've been using recently, I can then choose to select the location and fill in all the metadata and check the document in. So again, we've really been focusing on document libraries so far, which are the best place to be managing documents, obviously, but also emails, because then you've got metadata and the ability to check in, check out, and version control them and things. But also, Harmony gives you access to other list types as well. So they could be task lists or announcements, contact lists, or custom lists. And we'll see here that when I browse to a SharePoint site that has some other lists there, I can access those within the Harmony sidebar. I can utilize all the views and the metadata and the mechanisms that are there. So I can add items, I can edit them, or update them follow them, all the same kind of things that I could do in a document library, I can do with a list item here. Again, if we go up a level to our construction site here, we'll see that I've got a list of links, and I've also got a task list for the project task for this particular project that I'm working on. So from here, I can choose to add a task and fill in all the necessary metadata. I can also choose to use any of the views that are available there. So I can see, maybe just the tasks that are assigned to me in that case. And I can see, anything that's completed, anything that's still open, anything that's late or overrunning, and I can update those directly from here as well. So if I now click on that item, we can maybe edit the priority or who it's assigned to, and those kind of things. Maybe that's been put on hold or deferred or something. I can actually attach documents to a list item as well by dragging them onto the list item, but it will then just be an attachment. The attachment is obviously not then going to be version controlled or have its own metadata, only the item itself will. And as we said before, I can also follow that for activity and updates by adding those lists and views and things as favorites. So Harmony gives me the ability to access content held in multiple locations, whether they're sites that I'm following, my OneDrive, and also teams and groups that I'm a member of. Everything else here is SharePoint sites or site collections, and you can even discover site collections that you have permission to access and add them into the sidebar as well. So once you've added, like, for example, your default site collection or root site collection of your environment, you can then right-click on that and choose the option to discover more sites that you have permission to access. It will then query your SharePoint environment, whether that's SharePoint Online or SharePoint On-Premise, and give you a list of all the SharePoint site collections that you have access to. So you can go ahead and choose the ones that you want to add into the sidebar and make available in the Harmony interface. Again, just let's have a little brief look at each of those. So if we click on the All Locations view here, we'll see that kind of like summary view of everything in one place. So sites that I'm following, my OneDrive, teams and groups, and my site collections that I've added in. And they could have been added in manually or automatically in a number of different ways as well. But if I just right click on one of the site collections that I've got there, it will then, as I say, query the environment that that site collection belongs to show me any other site collections I have access to. So it might be I actually want to add in a couple of other site collections there. I can choose them, add them to the list here, and then add them into the sidebar. So it's very nice and easy as an end user to actually manage the sites that you see and that you're connected to. So with that, we'd just like to ask a poll question.
So if you could please answer the question on your screen, are you currently saving content to the Teams channel? And if you are, or if you haven't done it yet but are considering it for the future, or you just don't have any plans right now to do that. And we'll give you a second to answer the question. Okay, Richard, let's show you the answers.
Let's see.
Can you see that?
Oh, not at the moment, but let's just.
So I'll be happy to
It's just my screen.
It's possible 54% of the people are currently saving
okay.
content to Teams. 29% are considering it, and 18% have no plans.
Okay, so I think as we kind of expected, the majority of people are either using Teams or looking to use Teams for kind of collaboration around document management. And I'm not surprised Microsoft are heavily pushing the whole Teams kind of interface and platform as a kind of front end to all of your collaborative solutions. And that's where we're really looking to add more capabilities around Teams in the upcoming versions of Harmony. So I think as we kind of briefly showed a second ago, I can display the teams that I'm a member of, and I can easily get to the libraries that are associated with those teams to capture content and work on the content in the sidebar. What we're actually looking to be able to do is actually have a combined view of Harmony that gives you the teams and the channels of those teams, and be able to actually capture the content that you need into the team. Now, at the moment, we've been working with SharePoint as the repository for emails and documents. And what we will be doing is giving you the option to also continue to do that via the team channel, for example. So if I want to capture an email to a particular channel in a team, then it will upload it into SharePoint, but also give you the option to save the email into the team mailbox instead and put the attachments to that email into the library that's associated with that particular team or channel, so that basically emails can be either stored in SharePoint or in Exchange, but there's a relationship between the team and the content and the different entities. Now we'll go into more detail on that when that version is announced in the next month or so. But also in this particular version that we will be releasing, we're adding the capability to actually drag and drop documents into your favorites in the same interface. So it's kind of expanding on the favorites mechanism that we've been showing you through the course of this webinar. But something that a lot of people have been asking for in the past is, okay, I've got lots of favorites and I've got a single view of them. I actually want to just be able to drag and drop onto those favorite locations without having to necessarily go into them. So just to kind of illustrate that case, if we take a scenario where we've got an email and I want to capture it, if I click on my favorites view now, you'll see that it's going to be that combined view of my teams that I'm a member of, and also the channels that I've chosen to follow and display here as well. So I'll be able to drag and drop content onto the channel, and as I say, either put that into the team mailbox or the team SharePoint library. But if we take a look at some of these favorites that we've got here, if I want to capture this email into this conversation view, I can just drag and drop it into that particular favorite and it will get uploaded. But then it might be that I want to capture this other email or a document that I've received into another library. So without having to kind of jump around between locations, it actually picks up, if there's required metadata, the content types and all those kind of things. So just to kind of streamline that interface as well. And with that, we'd like to ask another poll question.
So please let us know, are you using retention labels from the Microsoft Compliance Center? And please tell us you either are or you're considering it in the future or you just don't have any plans to at the moment. And we'll give you a minute to vote to answer. Okay, I think everybody answered that pretty quickly. So here are your answers. Richard, let me know if you can see this. I'm not sure if you're having problems.
No, it's okay. I can see it. It's just the interface was behind my
Okay.
slide last time. So yeah, it looks like in this case the majority of people don't have plans to use retention labels from this audience. I think it's something that will come more over the coming kind of year or two, particularly from a kind of like GDPR type of initiatives and things where you need to have, you can't just keep everything forever. You need to have some kind of mechanism in place to retain content for certain periods of time or dispose of content after certain periods of time. And the Compliance Center is obviously Microsoft's solution for that. And we are adding support to apply those labels and honor those labels and visualize them from the Harmony interface. So for example, here, if I select a document and right click on it, you'll see that I have the ability to apply a retention label to say, okay, this is a contract and it needs to be stored for a particular amount of time, or it needs to be retained after a particular amount of time. So all of these policies are actually configured in the Compliance Center in Office 365. And then you apply them to the libraries and the locations that you're working in. So once a label has been assigned, you'll be able to see from Harmony the label that has been assigned to it. And also, for example, if the policy is telling you that it has to be kept for 10 years or 20 years or whatever, then you won't be able to delete it. If you try to delete it, you'd get a message to say there's a retention policy on this item that is preventing it from being deleted until a certain date. So again, just a quick peek at that. So if we go into actually one of those locations here that we just captured that claim summary to, and we can see the document directly here. But if I right click on it, I can see the retention policies that are available to me. And in this case, it might be that I need to apply a particular period. So I'm going to apply that policy there, and we can see that once that has been applied, it's indicated in that view there. So now if I were to try and delete that item here, you'll get a message to say that there is a label that's applied to that item. It's preventing it from being either edited or deleted. So hopefully that's given you a reasonable kind of insight into some of the things that we're going to be adding to the Harmony interface in the next version. And with that, we'd just like to ask a final poll question.
So please let us know if you'd like to be contacted by a Harmony representative as a customer with customer questions, or if you'd like to trial Harmony, or you just have some questions that we can answer for you. And while you're answering the question on your screen, I will ask Richard a couple of questions that have come in during his webinar. Richard, are the Harmony add-ins available for Office 2016, and are they included in the standard enterprise license?
They are included in the standard enterprise Harmony One license. I mean, basically, when you buy Harmony, you get access to, or you're licensed for all of the Harmony products for a particular user or number of users. And the apps, I believe, are available for 2016 onwards in Office 365.
Great, thank you. And someone's asking, how do I add teams to my all sites view?
Okay. So let's switch back to Outlook. So if you're not seeing Teams here in the All Locations view, if you go into the options just by clicking on the drop-down kind of menu there, you'll see under the People section, you've got some options there. So, for example, whether to show OneDrive, whether to show the sites that you're following, whether to show your teams and groups. So just by ticking that option there, you'll then get a section called Teams and Groups. Once you double click on that, it will then query your environment for the teams and groups that you're a member of.
Great. Now could you please show us how you add the Harmony ribbon to Word and Excel?
Okay, so there's a number of different ways to do that. Basically, because it is a add-in, a web app, basically, you get it from the Office store. So you can either do that from the application itself, or from, if you wanted to do it for all your users or a group of users, the Office 365 admin can do it from the admin center. But just as an example here, if you click on, get add-ins and search for Harmony, you can then choose to add the add-in there and manage it. So I've added it twice because it was already there for me, because our admin has added it. So for example here, if I manage my add-ins, you can see that I've got an admin manage one that was added from the administrator, and I've just added that myself as well, so I can just remove that from there. And there's nothing to install for that, it's just enabling it. And as I say, it's available both in the desktop applications, but also if I open up Word in a browser. So for example, if I open up new window, go into Office 365, you see it's just loading the add-ins. And I have the same functionality there. So I can open from SharePoint or save to SharePoint, and it loads in exactly the same way.
Okay, Richard. Can I hide the SharePoint sites view and only show the Teams view?
You could do. So for example, you can provision the sites in the sidebar via the registry. It's just a case of obviously pushing that out via group policy or as part of the MSI deployment. So in order to get your teams, you have to push one site that's going to get the user profile service. So for example, here it could be like this Harmony Office 365 site. But when I push it via the registry, I can set it as the social server to use the profile, and you can hide it from the UI. So it's just a switch on the registry to say, okay, well, I want to use it, but don't show it. In which case, it will then pick up your OneDrive and your Teams, and if you've got the options, again, which can be controlled via the registry to say, I want to show Teams and groups, or I want to show OneDrive, so you would then just see your Teams and groups there.
Thank you. I'm just going to ask a couple more questions because we're taking a very long time today. When will the function of being able to apply labels be available in Harmony?
So that is planned to be available around the end of September, so just over a month away.
Great. And how do I upgrade to the latest version of Harmony if I'm already using it?
So all you need to do is go back to your original order confirmation email, which will have your login details to your download area. If you've lost that or if you need the credentials again, then please contact us. But basically, you log into your secure download area and you can download the latest version of the MSI packages.
Great. Thank you. Richard, thank you for that wonderful presentation and demo. Thank all of you for joining us today. If we didn't answer your questions, someone will follow up with you shortly, and we'll send you an email with a link to view the webinar and see the presentation again in a couple of days. And we look forward to meeting you again at our next webinar. Thank you.